How's your week been?
So good. So good. I'm having a great time. I love Scotland.
How many times have you been over before?
Like, I think this is my 4th time. Is it? 4th time. I think so. 4. I'm going to go with 4. Could be 5. We don't know. Not many.
Do you see, do you think there's like a similarity between Scottish people and Irish people?
Yeah. The sense of humour is exactly the same.
Okay.
The accent is quite hard to understand. I'm still learning to deal with it. But yeah, it's very similar. Like even Glasgow's quite similar to Dublin. It's just
like
bigger.
city-wise?
Yeah, it's just bigger. Dublin's kind of very like central, like everything's within walking distance, and kind of everywhere here is really spread out. So you have to drive or get a taxi or whatever. So it's just bigger, but it's kind of the same.
We're kind of talking there about similarities between Scottish people and Irish people. Mm-hmm. What sort of qualities do you think you need in a collaborator when you're working on music with someone?
I think personality is a big thing, isn't it? I think you have to have a click with someone to make good music. Because if you go into something, blinded or blindsided by someone, you don't get on with them, you find it a bit awkward, it's going to take you longer to settle down, and then you won't fully get to the music point that you want to get to. And then on top of that, music itself and writing music is already a very vulnerable thing. It's very hard to get to a place where you're able to discuss things like heartbreak or, being in love with someone, let alone being with a stranger trying to write that. So I think a genuine friendship is something that's like necessary. So I like to meet people before I write with them and go for coffee and just have a chat, because first meetings and then writing sessions straight after that tend to don't work. Like,
I mean, especially in that kind of environment of a writing session where it's kind of in and out. Mm-hmm. Like if you're going into that fresh and that's the first time you've met them, mm-hmm. I imagine it can be quite an intense experience trying to achieve something from it.
Yeah, and I'm a bit of not socially awkward. I wouldn't say maybe. I might be a bit socially awkward, I'm not sure. But I get very I over talk and I talk really fast when I'm nervous. So like if I meet you for the first time, I'd be like, blah, 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 and they'll be like, whoa, hold on a second, give me a second to breathe. So it's nice to kind of get the nervous jitters out before I sit in and do business stuff.
You were saying that, it's about having a personality and you can click with people, mm-hmm. and you feel like you can match up. How long does it typically take you to tell that? When will you know if you're going to have that kind of click with someone, you're going to be able to work with them in that space?
Right, I think right away. I think you can get a person's sense of personality very quickly, and I would say I'm a good people reader as well. So I'm very quick to the mark whether I'm going to like you or not. Although I haven't not liked someone I have written with so far, so we're safe.
Do you find you tend to collaborate with the same people, or will you kind of be working with different people all the time?
I think I'd love to branch out. I have a core hub of people that I work with. I have 2 producers and we do basically all the stuff together. I do most, if not all, of the writing, and they do the production, and then I do vocal production. So I do that, chop that, put that there. So I tend to work with them quite often, and then occasionally I have 2 songwriters in London that I work with. The one that I work with more is Mikey Gormley, and he's amazing. So I work with him quite often. But I'd love to branch out. I'd love to try and get into the scene over here, and because there's some really, really good bands over here, really good songwriters. So I'm excited to see that. I
guess, the people that you're working with in London, do they tend to be more kind of pop songwriters?
Not really. Like Mikey works with Fleur. Do you know Fleur East?
Yeah.
She I don't know if she won the X Factor. She definitely was on it. Yeah. You gotta play that sex. That's that song. I'm pretty sure he had a hand in that. So he's a good dude, good skin. He works with a lot of up and coming pop singers. He does a lot of acoustic-y stuff though. So obviously coming into acoustic from electro pop is quite different, but it seems to work.
It's interesting as well that you're saying, you've got that core hub of people that you mm-hmm. tend to work with quite a lot, because you used to be in a collective, right? Mm-hmm.
Whoa, you did research.
What was how long ago was that? A few years back?
Yeah, that was probably 2018, I think. I was a part of a collective called Good Buzz. And it was really just all of us were too afraid to do music by ourselves. So we would travel in a pack and do gigs together, and it was so fun. We did some really, really cool gigs. We all helped each other out. So I would do backing singing for Sean, who was Y-Axis, and then he would do production for me. So we all helped each other out. It was like a little a team for sure.
So was when you're saying, you would go and perform together, are you performing as a group on stage?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'd write songs and then we'd go through the songs that we wrote. So, Sean would do 4 of his, I would do 2 of mine. Do you mean it was different every time? And then sometimes if Sean was the biggest artist out of all of us, so he has a big platform. So if he got booked for a gig, we would just support him. So we'd do our own set, or I would do backing singing for him. So it was always a collaborative thing for sure.
What do you learn about your own songwriting voice through collaborating in a group like that?
I say it all the time. I learned everything I needed to learn for the next step of becoming an actual solo artist off the boys, 100%. Sean had been doing it a long time before me. So getting to see his style of music, which is like rap, and how he performed, definitely crafted me into the performer that I am. Just constantly being around people who were super confident on stage, as someone who wasn't and didn't really want to be on stage, just wanted to sing. It was a grown experience for sure.
I guess now that you feel like you're more comfortable on stage, though, does that then in turn feed back into the writing process? Does it impact that in any way?
Yeah.
What is the relationship between those two different parts of being an artist like for you now?
Well, I don't like doing live stuff. Not that I don't like it. I think it's really, really cool. And when you get an audience full of people who are there for you, it's very cool. Doing the support stuff where no one knows you, the festivals where no one knows you, is quite difficult at the start. And I'm very lucky in Ireland to have, a very small following of people who tend to go to the same gigs no matter where I play. So it's really cool. But yeah, I'm not that I'm not confident on stage, because I've been on stage my whole life, but I definitely have a switch on and off. I go from being who I am in real life to the performer that I am. So yeah.
I mean, that's interesting too, because you were saying you weren't comfortable on stage, but you were a musical theatre kid as well, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Were you comfortable on stage in that domain?
For sure, because musical theatre and pop music is 2 different things. You can hide behind people and characters that you're in a musical theatre. You're not you. Whether, no matter what musical you're in, you're never going to play yourself. And there's always too much going on. There's too many people on stage. So if you mess up, you're likely not to see. When you're on stage by yourself and there's only 2 of my band behind me and me, there's no covering it. You just have to keep going. So it's a very frightening thing. But yeah, it's fun. I'm loving it.
I guess it's the same in the music too, though. Because I mean, when you're performing someone else's work, that kind of side of the pressure is taken away. Whereas when you're writing your own stuff, mm-hmm. it's kind of, you're very much on show.
Mm-hmm. For sure. It's a very what's the word? Just it's just frightening. It's very frightening to be the center of attention when you don't want to be, really. I always say it all the time, I just want to be a singer. I want to release music. I want to just let people listen to it on the radio or Spotify or whatever it is. I never really wanted to get into the live side of it, but it's inevitable. You kind of have to. And this year, I've been super lucky with the gigs that I've been getting recently, and coming out of lockdown, I was doing a lot of virtual gigs, a lot of live streams and stuff. So I've been kind of learning to get into the role of playing live, but it's difficult. It really is.
How did the live streams kind of play into that?
I hated them. They're horrible. They're actually so... I swore down, no matter how many pandemics we go into in the future, I'm never doing a live stream again. Ever. I don't mind podcasts, don't mind any of that, but talking to yourself on a screen for 40 minutes, no.
Well, that's because there's no... I guess when you're performing on stage, you're feeding off the audience. There's a reciprocal relationship there.
Yeah.
Whereas a live stream, there's nothing.
Yeah. And you're supposed to be yourself and show your personality, but how are you supposed to, unless you're super good at looking at yourself in the mirror and making yourself laugh, there's no way that you can do a live stream and look good. Haven't seen one.
You mentioned the idea there of, when you're performing, you're trying to convey yourself. Mm. How do you see your musical theatre background relating into that? Is it almost a particular version of yourself that you're trying to convey when you're on stage, as opposed to this kind of raw, unvarnished thing?
Yeah, well, I think my genre of music is quite flamboyant. It's electro pop, so I think you kind of have to turn into this persona. And I think being in musical theatre for so long and being able to, switch into roles of characters that were so far from who I am definitely helped. And I pull from my college days of musical theatre all the time. I really do feel like I turn into a character on stage, even though I'm myself and I'm singing my own songs that I wrote, I feel like I definitely turn into this like show woman, for sure.
When you were growing up as well, I heard that you wrote stories and poems.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued, were those stories and poems, were they about other people or were they already autobiographical at that point?
They a bit of both. Like, I loved writing fiction. I'd have mad dreams. I've super vivid dreamer. So I would just like write them down and then I'd continue them and bring them into school. And I'd be that kid, like, and teacher, can you look at this story I wrote? And they're like, A+, like, yeah. So it's one of those kids. But my mom's a really good writer as well. So she would always like encourage me to write, or we'd sit at the table like after dinner and we'd write stories together, we'd write poems. Any chance to write a song, my mom would be on it. So
were you a big reader as well?
No. Absolutely not. Can't read a book for my life, which is so funny. I'm so undiagnosed dyslexic. It's not even a joke. But yeah, I can't sit down and read a book. I don't have the attention span. I have ADHD, so I'm very like, but I can sit and I can write a story and I can write a song, which is very contradictory, but what can you do?
How do you channel that frenetic energy when you're in the studio?
I don't really know. I think the environment that I'm in when I'm with the boys in the studio is very homely. It's kind of similar to this setup, except there's music equipment in it. There's couches, you know. It's very chill. So I think the more familiar with the environment I am, the easier I can sit into a situation. If I'm in somewhere where I don't know, if I've been in studios in the past where I've walked in and they're huge, there's like millions and millions of euro worth of equipment in it, and I'm just like, can't concentrate because there's too much going on. That's very difficult for me. But being in my own little studio where I know my people, where I know the vibes and everything, and I can control the situation and the environment, is a lot easier for me to sit into it. But I do work very quickly. I work in like sporadic like forms. Like I'll come out with someone, I'll write a chorus and a verse, and then I'll have to go away and do something and come back to it. So all my songs are written and finished very quickly because my attention span's not very good.
Can you sense when one of those frenetic bursts is going to come? Can you feel it coming?
Yeah, I get it. A lot of the time they happen at nighttime, like really late in the morning, basically. I'll wake up and I'll be like, okay, right, I need to write a song now. And then I'll wake up and I'll write in my notes like a full song, and then I'll come back to it like 6 weeks later and form it into a piece, if I hear the right music for it. So yeah, it's random every time. I don't really have a set way of writing. It's just whenever it comes to me kind of a thing.
Because quite a few of your songs as well, they started on like GarageBand, iPhone demo type things, right? Mm-hmm. What do those kind of look like? What are you bringing into the studio? What's the actual kind of shape of that demo?
I don't so much do that anymore because the boys tend to do the production stuff, but the GarageBand days was a lot of sitting on a bus on the way to work, and my bus is like an hour and a half into town to work and stuff, and it would just be me like pressing keys, trying to find guitar rhythms and then whispering lyrics into the back of the bus, trying to figure out what the melodies were going to be, and then I'd go home and re-record it and send them over. Now they were shite, they were so bad, but a lot of the time we got really good samples out of it, and stuff that you hear in my songs that you have to listen very carefully to hear is like background noise off a bus, or there's me screaming yeah, like in a lot. We put that in every one of my songs because we think it's so funny, but it's like obviously mixed in so you can't really hear it that much, but it's in every song that I do, which is an ongoing joke between us. But it's a lot of cool samples that we got from my GarageBand days for sure.
What does the sampling process look like now then?
As in the music process itself, like the creating the music?
More the production side, like how are you kind of building those soundscapes if they're not coming from the GarageBand demos that they once were? Yeah,
no, not really. We use Splice now a lot. Splice is a really cool tool for samples. Do you know what? Sometimes if I'm out on the street, I'll record things that I hear if I think they sound cool. Like there was a couple of weeks ago, there was a bird outside my window and it was mental. It was like, bah! It sounded like it was dying, and I was like, that's hilarious. So I recorded it for like 2 minutes straight. It's just a 2-minute voice message of it, this bird dying. And I sent it over and I was like, we need to like morph this, and the boys are working on it. So we'll see what comes out of it. Like it could be a really cool sample. We don't know.
Well, I think was it the last song as well that was it like a really horrible synth note or something that it stemmed from?
Yeah, Yeah.
It's kind of that similar thing with what you're saying there about this horrible sound of the bird, and you're trying to figure out a way to turn that into something that's going to sound cool.
Yeah. So we were doing basically my manager said to us, your song did super well over here in Ireland, and it was one of the top songs in the charts, and we had to follow it up basically. So they were putting pressure on us to make a new song. Follow up quickly. So we sat on Zoom. Both me and Alex were so hungover, like really just deadly hungover, that we couldn't. I had to keep putting my laptop down to like go puke and then come back. It was so bad. But don't know why I told you that. That's on footage now. Cool. Sorry, Alex. But he pressed this like wobble bass by an accident. It was like, and we were like, oh, what was that? And then I was like, actually, let's go back to that. And he was like, no, I'm not pressing that again. But he pressed it, and I was like, no, we're gonna make that. We're gonna
figure out a way to use it.
And it turned to be the whole song. So the whole way through the song you'll hear it, but it's the bass that everyone's like, whoa, what is that bass? We're like, we don't know. It was an accidental discovery, and it's horrible. Don't play it by itself.
What is it that's sparking that in you? Is it almost like you just hear something and it sounds so different that you're kind of intrigued by it?
Yeah.
Or what is it? Yeah. What is it that's pulling you
For sure.
toward that horrible, appealing sound?
I think I just I'm so bored of music. Like I get bored of things very quickly. Like I'm sick of hearing the same things, the same drum patterns, the same basses in every song that's on the radio. And like, I'm trying to be a pop artist. Yeah, I'm trying to be in the same genre as the people who are making the same music, but I don't really want to fit into that.
Well, I mean, if you look at a lot of the pop music that is successful, it's because they're doing something weird and something different. Billie Eilish now, there's been a lot of copycats kind of following it, but at the time,
she was the original.
Yeah, there was nothing really like that kicking about.
Yeah, but like you get your Dua Lipas, and it's the same.
That's more,
do you know what I mean?
But that's very like kind of heavily producer driven type stuff.
Yeah. But so I'm just trying to steer clear of that. So whenever I hear something that I can hear some potential in, I'll click to it. Like
the two, it was Alex and Adam that you work with quite a lot. Were those the guys that you went and did Breathe with?
Yeah.
Because that was one that kind of came together a bit differently, right? It came together quite quickly.
So I had been working with Adam. I did Berries with Adam, and Alex was my guitar player, and we had just met. Just before COVID kicked in, we did 2 gigs.
So was he your guitar player before he was your producer?
Yeah.
Okay.
And during lockdown, he was like, I'm kind of into producing, but I'm not very good at it. And I was like, well, I kind of want to write, so maybe we should do a writing session. And I had written down lyrics of me. We had just gone into lockdown, and I was panicking about not being able to leave my house, and I'm diabetic, so there was no chance that I was going to leave the house if my mom was going to allow, because I live with my parents. So my mom was like, you need to be in your room 24 hours a day until this pandemic ends. And I was freaking out because I need to get outside. Like I have ADHD. I can't be sitting down in one place for too long. Like, so I was freaking out. So I remember I wrote in my notes, I've been locked in my house for 4 days and counting. And that was the first line of the song. And it was just this whole, like basically diary entry, like a lot of my songs tend to be, of me just freaking out about this whole pandemic and what it is and what it means, and then me finding like some sense of like, okay, but we'll get through it, because there's no way that they can't like something like this can't kill a whole population. Like we'll get there eventually, but it's probably going to take ages. And that's what the song was about. It kind of turned into like a cheer up song for people who were struggling through the pandemic. So Alex kind of hopped onto that very quickly.
Was that before the lockdowns or anything had come in?
It was just
before,
during it.
Yeah.
So there was like, it started, and then we were in lockdown in Dublin for like 6 weeks, and then we were allowed travel within 5 kilometers. So my studio was within 5 kilometers at the time. So we literally jumped in. It was so weird. Like we hadn't seen each other in 6 weeks. We were, really, really friendly. So it was so weird that we couldn't hug. We were all wearing masks in the studio. Like it was so weird. The mic was being cleaned every 2 seconds, and I was trying to sing in between, and everyone was afraid to touch things, and it was like so mental. So it really like heightened the experience of making Breathe, but it came together so quickly because we were all really just fucked off about the situation. Like, do you know what I mean?
Do you think that's your most immediate song today?
I think so. I would say so. That's a good word. Immediate.
I think but you get that. It's really interesting how clearly you kind of get the feeling from the environment in which it was forged. Like you get that sense of it kind of spilling out, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it was a really natural thing. It was a genuine outburst of feelings, I think. And I think the music does a really good job of holding it together and making it seem like an experience rather than just a song, if you get me.
How would you describe the headspace that Favourite Thoughts came from in comparison to Breathe?
I mean, Favourite Thoughts is about adult activities, as in going out drinking. And I was a very sheltered kid. My mom was quite strict on me, and I didn't have my first drink until I was 18, until my 18th birthday and stuff. So I'm 23. I'm not a big drinker. I don't go into clubs, but in recent years, I love a club. I love techno. I love this and, the nightlife and stuff. And I feel like Favourite Thoughts was a product of me being like, I'm on it all the time. I love it. Love the rave. So yeah, I think that's the headspace were two different dynamics. I think I was sad, scared, and just confused in Breathe, and then Favourite Thoughts, I'm so sure where I am, and I'm sure where what's happening and what I like and what I don't like, and I think it's a growth in my music and my person, if that makes sense.
It's interesting too, you're saying that your mum was kind of strict on you growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And you never your first drink until your 18th birthday and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Is that partially what kind of brought you towards stuff like musical theatre and creativity, do you think?
Maybe. I don't know.
It's like looking for some sort of rush. Because if you know what I mean, like a lot of people go to like drinking and stuff to kind of get that buzz. And if you can't get it from that, creativity is quite a good natural way to get that.
Never even thought of that. That's brilliant. Log that. He's a genius. No, like, I don't know. I feel it could well have been. I mean, musical theatre is terrifying. Being on stage is terrifying. So maybe it was something to do with that. My family aren't very big drinkers, so it was never really an issue for me to not drink. I didn't really try rebel because I didn't really see a side to it. I was not in a popular group in school. I was kind of a bit of a lame kid, so like I didn't have friends that would go out drinking or drinking fields and stuff. Although I knew people that did, and I'd be like, is it fun? How fun could drinking cans in the rain be? Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I never really had the sense to rebel. So it could be I found it in other ways. That's an interesting perspective for sure.
Yeah. I guess it's interesting. Well, no. But I'm just thinking there too, you're saying you didn't rebel growing up, and now you're kind of rebelling with what you're doing with your music. And what we're saying about you wanting to kind of push the envelope and not just be doing the same kind of bass line and the same drum beat as everyone else. Mm-hmm. Again, it's another example of something kind of coming to a head in music.
Yeah.
That wasn't previously in any other aspect of your life.
Could be just late development, really. Like, the way some people get their boobs when they're like 10. It could be just like me kicking in now, like I didn't do this for whatever 18 years of my life, and now I'm starting to basically do it backwards. It could well be that. We don't know. We'll see.
Quarter life crisis kicking in.
I have to yet go off the rails, but we'll see.
With coming back to Favourite Thoughts as well, mm-hmm. It seems to me like with what you're trying to do emotionally in that song, although you were saying it kind of has that light-hearted side to it, it is also dealing with some deeper and darker mm-hmm. emotions too. Can you tell when you're being safe with your music and when you're kind of going into those darker places? Like, can you hear that in the music?
I think so, yeah. I think I'm a very transparent person. I think you can get a sense of who I am very clearly from my music and where I'm at mentally. And I think Favourite Thoughts was created just as I was coming out of a really bad mental space. So I think you can hear the drastic switch in music and the drastic sense of style that I was going into. I went from Feel It, which is like fairies, angels, balloons, all this stuff, to like really heavy, like almost nearly techno type music. And it's
pulsing.
I think it just reflects, I think my music genuinely reflects where I am and what I am whenever it comes out.
How often do you write?
All the time.
Every day?
Every day. Yeah. I always write something every day.
Can you tell, like, say, like what you've been writing over the last week, can you see how that directly relates to what you're doing in your life at the moment? Like, can you see that connection immediately, or does it take a bit of time for you to unravel it?
Yeah, it depends what my situation is. So obviously I'm from Dublin, and and I work in Dublin. I work in retail in Dublin. So when I'm at home and I'm in work, it's a lot darker. It's like, fuck my life. Like proper emo stuff. And then when I'm here, I'm just on a good buzz all the time because I'm with my girlfriend. I'm like, I get to see her every 2 weeks. So when I see her, it's a great time. I love Glasgow. I love all my new friends that I'm making here. I get to do cool interviews and music and stuff. So it's definitely a lot happier than when I go home next week, for sure.
How long does that buzz last for though? Can it kind of carry into the following week a little bit?
Oh, I don't know. Do you know what? It's different every time. We're doing long distance at the moment in my relationship, and it's quite difficult. So for like a couple days after this now, I'll be on a downer. I'll be like, this is shite. I want to go back to Glasgow. But yeah, it depends. We're having a super good week at the moment, so hopefully it continues. I'm not a depressed bundle when I go home. Go back to my 12-hour day job. Like, Jesus, can't cope.
Do you find it easier to write when you're in a good place or when you're in a dark place though?
When I'm in a dark place, for sure. For sure. It's easier. People are familiar with pain. People are familiar with sad and depression. And it's easier to lean into because there's more ways to word it. It's very hard to word when you're in love. That hasn't been done already. It's very hard to word when you're happy and stuff. So there's so many descriptive words to fill the description of sad and not good, not mentally good. Doing happy and all that stuff is actually quite hard to write. There's only so much happiness you can spread without sounding like every other song ever. Like,
so it's not that you feel less creative, it's just that it's harder to kind of find an original way to say it. Comes back to what we were saying about like the bass lines and stuff and trying to find something that feels fresh.
Yeah, I think it's just quite. Maybe it's because I've always written sad songs. I grew up listening to really sad songs all the time and like heartbreak songs and stuff. So maybe it's just what I'm familiar with. But
right, what you know.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Do you think there are any sides to yourself that you haven't explored in your music yet that aren't present in what you've released so far?
Yeah, for sure. Like I used to sing country music. I used to sing country music when I was like a teen with an acoustic guitar. And I was doing musical theatre and I was training to be a soprano on top of that. So I have all of these different music styles that I've just never tapped into that I definitely think I will try incorporate at some point. But it's just, how do you be a soprano and a pop singer?
It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, right? We'll figure it out. Maybe I'll sample myself.
Does it feel easier when you're kind of going into more traditional pop styles of vocals after you've kind of been trained in soprano? Or is that a completely different kettle of fish?
I think it's a whole different thing. It's actually really difficult to swap in between them. Because when I was training in college, it was very intense. I would train like 3-4 times a week vocally. And my voice was the strongest it was ever. I was super, super strong vocally. And then obviously I finished college and stopped training.
When you say training 4 times a week, what does that actually look like? What does it look like when you're training your voice?
Just vocal lessons. So I'd go into a room for 2 hours, 2.5 hours a day. And I would do scales, chords. You'd do mad stuff, like you'd lie on the floor and scream, or like it's crazy the stuff that you would do. You'd have to walk around in circles going, or like singing like under your breath, or it was just crazy, like mad stuff. But that was my life for 4 years. And in between that we do dance lessons and we do acting lessons, and so it was very intense. Like you weren't allowed drink, you weren't allowed drink. You're in college. You weren't allowed drink. So it was very strict. Like it was a whole thing. They're basically training you for the industry. They're training you for London, which is the goal.
Did you know when you were going through all that training that you wanted to move away from musical theatre and towards pop?
Yeah, well, not pop. I think
something else.
Yeah, I was. Do you know what? I had the greatest first 2 years, and then started getting into like the nightlife stuff really heavy. And was just like, this isn't me anymore. I can't drink. I was coming in hungover, and they like, I'm airing this out, I'm airing my dirty laundry out. They pulled me in front of the board of like musical theatre heads, and they were like, we don't think you have it in you. We don't think you have it in you anymore. Like, you're not taking this seriously. And I was like, fair. I did just throw up 4 times today from the amount of alcohol that I consume. I'm making myself sound like I'm an alcoholic. I don't even drink that much. Like,
did you finish the course?
Oh yeah, I graduated with flying colours and proved them wrong. Yeah. So would love to see my lecturers at one of my gig now, to be fair. That'd be very funny. Very funny. See you told me I was shite.
Do you think that encounter that you had with them was what pushed you to then kind of go on and finish the course with flying colours? Was it a fuck you, I'm going to, push forward?
No, I think I was just good at it. Okay. I just think, I honestly think I was just like, I did it since I set foot on stage doing musical theatre when I was 6. It's all I've ever done, all I ever knew, and I knew I was good at it. Do you know what I mean? It was the only place where I felt comfortable. So like I was going to do well no matter what they said.
I mean, in your music now, how do you balance that kind of theatricality that's aesthetically pleasing with music that is kind of authentic and honest? Is that always an easy balance to strike, or how do you kind of measure that?
I don't really know. It might be just actually ingrained in me to find the balance. I don't think it's something that it's easy to find. I think you either have it or you don't. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, is it like when you write something that feels original, like what we were saying about, writing about sad stuff, it's easier to be original. Mm-hmm. Is it the same thing that it's quite an organic thing and it just happens and you can't really control it?
Yeah. Like I feel like you can learn to write music, you can learn to sing, you can learn to do all these things and you can be good at them. But I feel like it's either in you or it's not. Do you know what I mean? I think it's the same with like the inner dialogue of being trained from musical theatre to being a performer that sings pop music. I think there's just a natural progression between both, and it's hard to find. Like I struggled for ages. I didn't know what I was doing, didn't know what music I wanted to do. I think when you sit into it and you start finding yourself in your lane that you go into, you just go. It's just like set off. But it took me ages.
When did you realise you had it in you then?
Honestly?
Yeah.
Like probably last year. When
the single did well.
When Feel It did well. I think that was the first time I was like, geez, I actually can do this.
Did you need that kind of validation from an external point of view to kind of solidify the faith that you had in yourself?
Yeah, I think that's my one toxic trait. I think I need validation off other people to...
It's not necessarily a bad thing though.
Is
in
it?
Small doses. I think because I've seen people that don't need validation and they think they're the best thing since, because the ego just shoots off without that need for someone else to kind of steer you on the path. If you know
like
what I mean.
X Factor type beat. Do you remember those people that would go on thinking they're dogs bollocks and then be shy?
But really bad.
Yeah,
like the
really
ones
bad.
that would go on and would be horrific.
Oh, I missed that TV. That was fun. Bring that back. Like that was good crack.
Is X Factor still on? No.
Surely not. Is it?
I don't know. I have a feeling it is.
Time to let it die. Like time to
as long as it's making money though.
I know. I auditioned for X Factor.
What, did you actually?
Yeah, when I was 16, and it was literally like a slave camp. It was terrible. So bad.
How many people are auditioning for that?
Like
is
hundreds
it in Dublin?
and hundreds. Yeah, it was in Dublin.
Yeah.
It was in the Tree Arena, so it's like the biggest venue in Dublin, pretty much. In Ireland, I think it is.
I think that's a major operation.
Yeah. In and out, you get like 30 seconds to shine, and then you get to the next level, you get 30 seconds to shine, you get to the next level, you get put in a room full of big ass cameras, and they're like, dance, sing, and then you get put at a table and they were like, what's your sob story? And I was like, I literally was like, I'm diabetic. And they were like, okay, right, she's diabetic, put that down. So it was really bad, and they made it all the way to the last round and they booted me out. And I was raging. My diabetic story wasn't enough. I needed something gritty.
What do you think is the biggest challenge you've had to overcome to get to where you are today?
Myself. My genuine I feel like I want to say hatred, but it's not hatred. It's so intense. That sounds so emo. But like genuine, like I just don't think I'm good enough to do it. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like once, if you're like, people can tell you you're good, you can get to bigger places, but if you don't believe it yourself, I think you're already lost.
And that's what most people lack.
Yeah, for sure. I think.
And again, like what we're saying, you can't fake that.
No.
It's not something you can choose to have. It's something
Yeah.
you just kind of need to. But is it something that if you work hard, you know, we're talking earlier on about like you doing vocal training 4 days a week for years. Is it something that through that hard work you eventually gain? Like, although you can't consciously have it, if you start to put those hours in, is it something that just you think comes naturally after that?
I think it's something that you have to actively decide that you want to do. You have to decide that you want to believe that you can do it. And then once you start trying, it gets a bit easier. Like I wouldn't say I'm fully there. I have doubts about myself every day. I ask my girlfriend every day. I'm like, I don't think I want to do music anymore. And she's like, fuck off. You're still doing music. I'm like, I'm just gonna pack up my shit and move to Glasgow. And she's like, no, you're not. Like, so yeah, it's an ongoing battle. I think it's all to do with self-esteem and what you feel like you can put in the world and if it's good enough. Because realistically, there's a part of your brain that knows that there's billions of people that are doing the same thing that you are. And what makes you different enough to succeed? Do you know what I mean?
Luck and drive.
Right. And it's very hard to believe that like you have that package as well as that luck. So it can be very like it's a very wobbly subject. I think that's why a lot of creative people struggle mentally and struggle with like.
Also, I think it comes back to what we were saying about the high that you get from being on stage.
Yeah.
And then going back to, like for most people, everyday life, if that's all you know, you get used to it, you acclimatize to it and it's fine. If you're going up on stage playing fucking Hydro or whatever, and then you go back to working in a coffee shop, that's tough.
Yeah. But I think people are now very aware of that. Like there's so much more, like in Ireland, there's a thing called Creative Minds, and it's basically like anonymous, what's the word? I was going to say psychotherapy, but that's not the word. Psychology, therapists.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, that's the word. Therapists, like you can go online and you can chat to them. You can have like, I think it's like 9 sessions for free, which is amazing. Because like you have to mind yourself if you're creative, because a lot of the time they do struggle. But I would say it's probably the same for a lot of people who are doing music, a lot of people who are doing acting or whatever, creative things. It's themselves that stop them a lot of the time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
That was sweet. Thank you.
Nice.